Hi, and welcome to Random Walks in HR with me, Tim Peppers, and I'm very excited today to be kicking off a whole series around strategic workforce planning. So I'm going to tell you everything that I think you need to know about strategic workforce planning, and I am probably going to tell you a few things you don't need to know. But I hope you enjoyed the journey with me, and we're really going to cover everything from what is it, what are the different types of workforce planning, how do you do it, how do you look at supply, how do you understand demand, how do you do modeling, whether it's just Excel or using a whiteboard, all the way through to advanced data science skills. How do we do it? And most importantly of all, how do we drive impact? How do we actually take strategic workforce planning, or the skills we have, or the knowledge we built up, or the data we've accumulated, and help the organization drive and achieve its business goals through a more skilled and talented workforce? But before we get into that sexy stuff, let's start with the basics. What is it? And strategic workforce planning really changes and varies from business to business, but essentially it's a process. It's a process that gets us to understand what are the skills we need in the future. Okay, so we have what we have right now. We know that in our current workforce, people will leave and our current workforce numbers will go down. And we know in the future, our CEO will want us to give more customers, more profit, more revenue, more products, more. So once we have the increasing demand and the decrease in supply, we know there's going to be a gap there. Okay, and that's the difference between what we're going to have and what we're going to need. And then once we've understood that, we can really understand, okay, how do we resource? How do we get those skills? Do we develop them internally? Do we hire new people? Do we work with a third party? Do we whatever to achieve our business goals? So the first part of it is looking at supply, and we're talking about internal supply here. We're talking about our current workforce. Later on, we'll talk about external supply. So, how many people could you recruit, and what's the talent in your area? We'll talk about that around prioritization and looking at location strategy. But for now, supply is really internal supply. What do we have in terms of headcount, in terms of skills, but also in terms of that contingent workforce? Okay, so we want to think about contractors, we want to think about third parties where maybe we outsource certain processes or certain work. But we also want to think about, even kind of do we crowdsource? Do we get our customers and the members of the public to then do things around, advocacy or data, like a Wikipedia? So really think about the whole workforce. And once we understand the entire workforce, we want to then think about the supply long term. So we'll look at how often people leave, what's our attrition rates, and then projecting it forward on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever the business question we're trying to answer. And that supply will go down. You will not have all your employees stay over the next, say, 2 to 5 years. So that supply goes down, and that's fairly easy to forecast and simulate. The tougher thing is really around demand. And there you need to think about what drives activity, what drives skills requirements, what drives our headcount within an organization. A lot of organizations, it'll be customers, right? If I'm in a call center and I'm trying to work out how many people I'm going to need to answer calls, it's probably going to be related to how many people are customers. More customers means more people need to call the call center, means more people need to answer the phones, right? Other organizations might be different. It might be around products. It might be, how many products do we ship? How many products do we actually want to deliver? And how much are we creating new things in terms of R&D and research and, all these other areas. So we really think about what drives our demand. But then we also need to think about, well, what's the role of other things that are going to affect demand, especially around technology. New technologies is going to be a constant in the future. New technologies being created, enabled. Digital transformation is just as constant, but then also the impact of technology is going to be constant. So if we think about a call center, maybe we have 100,000 customers. Our 5-year goal is getting 1 million customers. That doesn't mean that in 5 years' time, if we hit 1 million customers, we're going to need 10 times as many people in the call center, because we will bring in new technology that's going to help us scale, that's going to help us talk to customers, chatbots or whatever else it is that's going to help us make sure that we're able to deal with a large proportion of customers. So in that demand side, we need to factor in both the drivers, but also some of those economies of scale that's going to help us meet future demand needs. Now, once we have those drivers, what we can do is scenario planning. The reason we do scenario planning is we cannot predict the future. It doesn't matter how good your model is or how amazing it is. Just predicting one future will guarantee you're wrong. So what we do is we do scenario planning where we think about, okay, what are the different possible futures? Because we can predict 4, 5, 20, whatever once we have our model. So if we take a call center, let's predict one future where we bring in this new technology to help us and we get our 1,000,000 customers. Great. Well, let's also think about what happens if we actually overachieve. What if we get 2 million customers? Often companies don't think about this. So that actually is great that we're being so successful, but we're hiring in loads of people and we're struggling to build. We have to get a whole new building and blah, blah, blah. Let's also then think about, well, what is that technology variable doing? Okay, so maybe the technology comes in, that's great, it helps us scale. What happens if the technology doesn't come in, or the benefits of that new technology don't quite propel? So then we're thinking about, okay, what do we have? 2 million customers, but poor technology? What also happens if we don't get 1 million customers? Maybe we only have 200,000 customers, so we've only doubled in 5 years' time, but the technology come in and has been really effective. That's when actually maybe our demand starts becoming our supply. So once we have these different scenarios, we can then have this nice visual demonstration of the supply going down, the demand going up, and then we have our lovely gap. And then we can think about, well, how do we fill that gap? And the cadence for that, for me, is always really around bots. So all these are build, buy, borrow, bot. We want to think bot first, okay? When we have a big skills gap, can we get technology or systems or robots or whatever it is to come in and help us do that, help further decrease the demands? Anything else out there that we're not currently implementing that'll help us reduce that demand and fill that gap? Then we want to think about build. Build is really about development internally, okay? The call center, can we upskill people that either meet some of these new skills, these new job requirements, or they're going to meet these roles of the future? Can we upskill, help increase engagement, help develop our employees, rather than hiring in new employees over them? Then we want to think about borrow. Is there anywhere else in the organization that might have the skills that can help, that we can kind of lean on those? So, for example, if technology is coming into our operations call center, does IT have the capacity and the capability to help assist, rather than building a whole new operations systems team? Next, we want to really think about borrowing externally, okay? So this is when we outsource. So again, using that new technology coming into the business, we want to think about, okay, if we don't have the skills internally, we don't have the capacity internally, maybe we don't have the capability, okay, is it best to go to a party? Is it a temporary need, so we can just go to that third party and temporarily use them? Or is it also a risky proposition? Are we not sure actually if this is going to work? So if we're putting a new product out there and we want to sell that product to new stores or new advertising campaigns, if that product doesn't work, if it's a complete bomb, sometimes it's better going to that third party, that contingent option and outsourcing option, because if we have if we think it's a high risk, we have low confidence in it, that's where we can scale down quickly, and that's where we can be a much more agile workforce if we're working in a very VUCA environment, very volatile and unpredictable. Once we've already used those options, then we get into buy. And buy is when we hire permanent employees. So we're increasing our permanent headcount. That can be great for quality. That can be great for long-term stability. But we do need to understand and have confidence that we will need that role in 12 months, 18 months, or however long, because our products or our customer base is going to be increasing. We're definitely going to need that skill. And the last one is bump. And bump is really is when the demand goes below the supply. So like that new technology comes in, but actually we don't drive up our customer base. So we actually have too many employees. And at that point, that's where we really think about redevelopment, reskilling. Can we move employees from this part of the organization and reskill them and move them to somewhere else rather than making redundancies? Or if we can't do that, then we want to think about retraining, redeveloping so they can find employment elsewhere. So that is strategic workforce planning in a nutshell. All the different things that I've talked about will be going into more detail. First, it will be around the timeline. So what is consumer-centric workforce planning, and what is the difference between resource planning, strategic workforce planning, and all the other types of workforce planning? So I really hope you can join us for that. If you enjoyed this and you want to look at the next one, the next video, please do subscribe to the channel, and we'll be posting quite a few of these videos within the playlist, and they'll pop up as soon as you visit YouTube. Anyway, that's my time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it wasn't a complete waste of your time. See you soon.